Wolfwalkers is a magical adventure set in Ireland in 1650 about two little girls, and one of them wants to be a hunter and the other one happens to also be a wolf. I think ultimately you're trying to create a kind of shamanic experience, something kind of in the language of dreams and something that speaks to the language of painting and drawing rather than live action, because that feels like you can tell a story that's more mythic, you know, and I think kids relate to that. There was a lot of stuff that we discovered during the making of it, like there's a kind of feminist message and even a queer metaphor that we never even realized as we were making it. There's a lot of stuff that comes through, but the beginning for Ross and I was to really speak about speciesism and how we lose much more than the animal when we let an animal go extinct. We lose much more than wilderness when we lose the wilderness. You know, we lose part of ourselves. And that connection was really obvious to our ancient ancestors and somehow got forgotten. I think it's imperative now, because considering the state of the world, that we remind children that we're part of nature. Nature isn't like a little garden over there for us to protect. It's actually us. We are nature. And if we protect nature, we're protecting ourselves. So that connection, I think that the ancient people knew about, we need to remind the next generations about. I think that's always the challenge, the tone, that you want to make something that's genuinely entertaining for kids. You don't want it to feel like, you know, they have to eat their broccoli, it's good for them. You know, they have to really enjoy it. And so we show the movie all the time while we're working on it in rough prints to kids, especially like 8 to 10-year-old, because they're really honest and they can really understand the story even when the movie is quite rough. And we always want to make sure that they enjoy it. And also for ourselves, we have to work on a movie for a few years. It's a lot of work. You want to tell a story that's, you know, it has a bit of humor and a bit of lightness and a bit of optimism. And after all, at the very, very heart of it, it's a story of friendship. And that first, like, close best friend that you make, I think a lot of people can relate to that. And that brings a lot of warmth. It's not, cinema is not plot. You know, cinema isn't text. It's kind of music and visuals and the emotions that are brought when you put both together. And I think that's, you know, that's what you carry out of the cinema with you. You might forget the details or even the characters' names, but how did it make you feel? And I think music goes really, really close to the heart really quickly. So yeah. When I was a kid, I was, especially as a teenager, I really identified with like the Irish music, like Clonid and there was artists that I really admired who were already using Irish mythology for inspiration. People like Jim Fitzpatrick, and there was comic books and stuff that I liked. But I also had a big influence. I loved American comic books. I loved, you know, Japanese animation, you know, French comic books. I had a big collection of Asterix. I was really inspired, of course, by like classic Disney and all, but also, you know, Eastern European animation. I love Marcel Jankovic and the Hungarian folktales from the Keshkemit studio, and of course Miyazaki and Takahata, kind of like the godfathers of it all. And with Takahata, the fact that he was able to deal with themes that you wouldn't normally consider animation themes, and he can deal with a lot of things really subtly. But the biggest thing for me was when I saw the Princess Kaguya, the way he was brave enough to use the pencil, the way the pencil made a mark as part of how he told the story was very inspiring for me. I had plenty of influences growing up, but of course, because I'm from Ireland, that's where I go back to. We had a real richness and a lot of commonality with other cultures. So I think the more specific you get looking at your own indigenous culture, the more you find parallels with other cultures and other people. Like, I always think it's a big responsibility to make movies that are aimed at kids primarily, because it might be the first movie they see. And definitely the movies I saw as a child made a big impression, whereas the movies I see as an adult, sometimes I just forget them because I see so much. So it's a big experience, you know, and especially an animated movie on the big screen can be like a big memorable experience for a kid. And I think that because I'm working through some themes of parenthood from my own life, I think, you know, there's stuff that parents will relate to as well, in that those big questions we have to ask ourselves about how much do we trust kids, and when can the kids teach us something, and when should we take control, and when our fear gets in the way of our parenting. All those questions are being worked out in the movie too, so I think parents will get a lot from it as well.